So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session. The session what you were waiting for. So this session is making 4.0 a reality in financial services and digital inclusion. Now, this session is a very interesting session. What we are going to do, we will be discussing 4.0. I believe that most of you have already heard about Industry 4.0. So for audience, this will be a really very interesting and very informative session. And in this session, I have got a very strong panel. We have got around 7 people who are with me. And the approach that we are going to follow is that I will be giving 3 minutes each to each of the speaker to speak on the topic. And during these 3 to 4 minutes, I won't be asking any question. So this is uninterrupted for 3 to 4 minutes. After that, we will be taking questions from the chat box. And finally, at the last 2 minutes, what we will be doing, we will be asking just a final message from the speaker to the audience. To start with, I will request Mr. Gary Thompson, who is the Executive Program Director and Intelligent Automation Advisor at Big Innovation Center Middle East. They are the leader in their field. So Mr. Gary Thompson, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Javed. Such a kind introduction. And yes, I do remember that program. It was a long, long time ago. And thanks for Head and the team at Africa Bank 4.0 Summit for asking me to share my experiences here in the East Africa debate. So let me start with an obvious question, obvious statement, sorry. Banks are using technology more and more and more. For two specific reasons. One, to engage with a much more technology-enabled and savvy customer. And the other thing is to bring down their operating costs, bring down that cost per transaction, enhance straight-through processing in operations. Let me give you one example, credit risk. Credit risk was once done on the recommendation of the good old-fashioned bank manager when bank managers knew their customer base, when they were the heart and soul of a community. And operating models changed. Managers got less authority. Their roles have changed. Credit risks moved into rules engines, but they're still built and manipulated by risk managers generally in head offices. And there is resistance to doing much around that, probably due to job security. People don't like to lose their jobs. The models were based on components like customer profile and banking history and exposure and collateral. Now all of that can be handled by artificial intelligence, which is quite interesting. They can start changing the rules based around credit risk just by looking overall at information that a credit risk manager would find it difficult to handle. I'll give you a bit of a caution there. Regulators put quite a great focus on risk management supervision. They expect financial institutions to be transparent in the way in which they're calculating risk, to be auditable in their risk management and their management frameworks. But one area in particular, things like collateral exposure, a very interesting subject. And you know, exposure to collateral, because collateral can change in value, is sort of outside the bank's control. Recently, I was working with a bank in Kuwait. Kuwait's a small country. I don't know if you guys in Africa know it that well. It's a small little country at the top of the Gulf. And it's got an interesting profile of relationships between people and between families and between companies. And there's also got interesting market movements because it's such a small stock exchange that we've got interesting movements in traded stocks and in real estate. Now, if the collateral's linked, if you link yourself to the stock exchange to check the value of collateral, you can check it in real time. You can look at your exposure for collateral. You can look at the analyst views. You can use AI for forecasting risk. And the collateral exposure is not just in the bank itself, it's bank to bank. So therefore your central bank have got a dependence there. And it's the same for real estate, using real estate as collateral. Exactly the same. You know, you got this exposure that needs to be looked at. So bringing together something like credit risk brings us on to my next subject in having a centralized depository of information. Now, one of the key drivers in this 4.0 discussion is around using digital identification to drive financial exclusion. Now, last time I looked, something like 12 to 15% of the population were unable, global population were unable to prove their ID. Now, what ID is got to be something that's issued by a government. It's got to be legal. It's got to be unique, and I think there's now a requirement to have it digital. Now, in the UAE, we've got a great ID system. Well, it's like 12 to 15% of the population. We're enabled, global population. Enabled. Hello, I've got a bit of feedback coming through here, guys. I'm sorry. The Emirates ID is registered and it's linked across government departments. It's linked to your residency. It records lots of things, not just your residency, your visa, your mobile phone number, your bank accounts via the central bank. It's a centralized depository of data on you. That's quite handy for opening a bank account. In the UK, they have no ID system. It's an invasion of your civil liberties. The impact is felt recently on the trace and test system for COVID-19. It's difficult to operate that when there is no central depository of the people you've got. Impact on me, I can't open a bank account in the UK. I haven't got a UK address. I need to provide a proof of payment, a proof of that address, electricity bill, council tax, paper, they want paper. Now here, I say everything's linked to your ID, and therefore I don't need to prove my address. I can go into a bank, I can hand them my ID, they can gather all the information on me, not just on me, but because it's linked to the central bank, all the information on other bank accounts I have and other lending I have. It gives complete exposure to the individual. I don't find it an erosion of my civil liberties. Some people take it differently. From a bank perspective,
excellent.
Can I just quickly go on? 2 secs. From a bank perspective, you need KYC. It's a legal requirement. I've done a lot of work around anti-money laundering, identity theft, terrorist financing. Without that ID, you're challenged. With emerging technologies, we've got the power in Internet of Things, we've got the power in AI to bring all this stuff together for the banks and make it visible across the regulators. Thank you, Javed.
So thank you very much, Gary, for sharing this wonderful experience. I know you are so experienced, and thanks for sharing the UAE experience. I believe that African banks, they have a lot of things to learn from it. And so thanks a lot for this wonderful briefing. And next, I will request Mr. Ameur Allag, which is Business Development Manager and Solution from Canon Central and North Africa. Canon is basically a very well-respected name, and they are leader in their field. So, Mr. Ameur, over to you.
Thank you, Javed. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So we see lately that Industry 4.0 indeed is a reality, and it's affecting everything, and it's accelerating with a tremendous amount of speed. Starting from the internet, the smartphone, the social media, and lately, one of the major events that we are living right now, which is the Corona pandemic, is making a radical shift across the global economy, and like they are practicing social distancing. And take for an instance, this event right now, we used to travel and go in person, but now we are just using one of the emerging technologies just to connect. Another phenomenon that we can see lately is the recovery of the financial market in a record time that never happened. And especially NASDAQ not only recovered, but it hit all-time high, driven mainly by tech companies that thrive and drive the Industry 4.0. In the developing world, the situation is a bit slower, but we can feel it's getting a little bit more momentum, and it's also accelerating with the adoption of the digital transformation and the digitization strategies. So the digitization is a prerequisite for the Industry 4.0. and a key element for the digital identification. Although most of the organization, they reached a level of a certain level of a digital transformation, but it's just beginning to happen. So especially in Africa, we are still looking at many companies now, especially with the pandemic, they started to embrace this type of new technology. And the traditional way of verification of documents, as we see that in Africa and many other countries and worldwide still now, is based on human interaction and physical documents. So mainly those physical documents are issued by central or local government, and you have to prove it manually and to check it, okay? But in those times where relentless digitization and 24/7 mobile connection and transforming everything, this method for identification is not relevant anymore, or it's not feasible alone. This is why we need to use some kind of digital transformation to push the digitization more and more. And another aspect, the digital transformation is driving the consumer experience or the customer experience. The expectation from the customer side is changing. The customer wants a greater experience, and they want convenience, real-time, mobile first. So they want some kind what we call seamless experience. Means like, as Gary said, that in UAE, with one ID, you can just do everything. That's a seamless experience. I don't have to do anything. I just show my Emirates ID because I'm based also in Dubai, and then I can do everything. On the other hand, they demand that if there is a seamless experience, they demand more security and protection, and their data is secured and private. So this is like the dilemma that is always happening. So from our perspective, what we can say, digitization, how it is as a core, is converting and managing and storing the data and information, okay? And this is all as a knowledge to put it as a computer readable format where you can treat it through AI or machine learning, and you make some kind of cloud computing in it. And this, it will give us more leverage. The data will be in a mobile way. So mobility means the data can be accessed by anyone that have access rights or special access rights to this data. And we can see now that the businesses that are failing to begin with the digital transformation, they will really struggle and they will be growing in disadvantage to the other companies, okay? And because there will be security threats everywhere. The documents, if they are not digital, people can steal them, they can be damaged, so many things can happen. And what I want to say that at Canon, we are focusing on the digital transformation and using many of the emerging technologies as artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud computing, and we are helping governments and financial institutions in Africa just to shift to digital by converting the process to automated workflows, and also help them to do something which is called the seamless customer identification and onboarding. So we are doing something which is called onboarding. This is why Canon came up with a guide which is called the Digital Transformation Guide that have practical insights on the digital evolution and how to help businesses to take a positive step just to convert their document or to convert, or what we call, we don't want, especially countries in Africa, maybe in UAE, it's easy to have one ID because there are 1 million, let's say, citizens, and there are 9 million visitors. They have always to do visas and everything. But when we take an example as Nigeria with 200 million people, and they have all the old certificate, birth certificate, and all this. So we need to play something which is called a hybrid environment. We take the data, we just digitize it, and then help the government and the financial institution to make sense of this data and to convert it to digital. But I want you just to remember that Canon technology will help you to overcome digitization challenges and to make the adoption to Industry 4.0 reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ameur. Thank you very much. And Ameur, who is the Regional Solutions Manager, his correct title. Ameur, thanks a lot. And it was really a good customer perspective. I really appreciate that instead of selling your product, you see the customer perspective, and you have nicely presented that what are the problems customer are facing and what is your solution. So thanks a lot. And next is I will request Mr. Francis Sirus. He's the regional manager, Frameworks, Freshworks from Africa. And I believe Francis Sirus, he has got a rich experience in this field. So please enlighten us. Over to Mr. Francis.
Thank you so much, Javed. Really appreciate all the efforts. So I'm going to take a quick step back and discuss about redefining this customer experience because of this the emerging trend. So with all the digital leaders of non-financial services industries setting benchmarks for customer experience, now the financial organizations have had to step up their game by adopting the digital first strategy with customer centering perspective as well, right? So for organizations, each customer interaction is an opportunity to generate insights that would help in not just delivering a seamless experience, but also to win customers' trust and loyalty. So, but also in optimizing, the product design and innovation comes into place here. So with shrinking margins and increasing commoditization of all the financial services products, owning customer experiences has become key to organizations for creating their own competitive differentiation and also avoiding a race to the bottom of the price competition here. So I would want to stick on to three major factors within the customer experience. One being finding new ways to acquire customers, and then optimizing the customer onboarding, and also driving hyper personalization using the AI. Now it's all chatbots and other AI ML driven functionalities. So these three is what I feel would help in redefining the whole customer experience using this, and I take this 4.0 as a place to discuss this particular topic.
Yes, please. So thanks a lot for this one. Really helpful. Next, what I will do, I will request Mr. Robert Ochieng. He is the Digital Transformation Champion, Futuristic African Network, and they are means leader in the field of digital transformation, I believe. So I will request Mr. Robert, the Digital Transformation Champion from Futuristic African Network. Over to you, Mr. Robert.
Thank you very much, Javed, for the opportunity and for the great introduction. So what I want to talk about today is to look at it from the personal finance point of view when you're looking at digital transformation. So first, I want us to take a journey and look at the year 2008 when you had the financial crisis. So after that, after the economic crash, what came up was there were a lot of regulatory frameworks that were introduced. Things like IFRS 9 that needed some form of datafication which would help with just looking at the customer data and be able to price risk accordingly. So after that, now we have a new layer of artificial intelligence. We have blockchain, and the need to convert whatever you had in any physical form into digital format. So digitization is very key. After that, given the current situation that we have, what is going to be very key is transformative finance, and sustainability is going to be very key. So people are going to look back and go back to tradition, whereby tradition is something that usually you can decide to ignore it, but to that back and look at a dinner table or and look at how family. There's a father, there's a mother, there's a child, there's a wife, a daughter. So in that family, what can we offer them as banks. So first of all, we look at the financial planning, the wealth management that comes with it. From there, people need to invest. We have managing risk using insurance products. So as people in the financial services sector, is that first availability and engagement. So the engagements are just the normal transactional messages. So there's no way customers can engage us. And that's very key. We can look at an example from Depot, which is a US company that deals in mortgages. And they're very good in what we call DIY, where you can go to the retail shop and you can be educated on what the products are. So we really need to improve on chatbots, engage the customers, and with datafication, we can collect more data and be able to provide for them products that are aligned to their personal finance and life goals. Because we're not just providing products from supply side point of view, but they should be demand driven. So as the daughter grows to a certain age, what can we offer them? And if they need some digital products, what are we looking at as banks and various organizations? So the father who is a CEO, is a C-level executive, what can we offer them? So we really need to personalize the services that we offer, and we need to be good on and very big on availability, because currently it is just it is based on when the banks can offer you this product. But what can we do so that we can be available and be part of the day-to-day lives of customers? So in terms of investing, we've seen a lot of products coming up that are things like fractional shares that are giving freedom to the users. Apple brought freedom to people when you look at the iPod in terms of just availing music to each and every individual. Investing at fractional shares now, people are being given that freedom to invest based on the income that they have. So these are things that are very key. So I would just insist that you look at the dinner table of a family, think how can insist that you look at the dinner table of family, things like how as institutions, there's data that we need to work within permission blockchain. So so that's very, very, very ensure look at SMEs, for example. Usually banks see that, for example, providing business advisory is like doing charity, but no, the few companies that are doing DIY, which is do it by yourself, whereby they're providing this information and engaging customers in their journey, they're really doing well. So you can't just sit back and say that I only deal with HNI. What if you run out of HNIs? Because the smaller guys, they're the HNIs of the future. And you've seen that banks that tend to have very thin niche, other banks are getting into those markets, and now they are recording flat growth. So we need to understand the customer journey and grow with the customer. There's that patience. You can't just come to them, say that I'm only concerned about this customer. The business is growing. The SME will become a corporate. Yeah, so that is what I would advise us to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. Thank you, Mr. Robert. Thanks a lot for sharing those thoughts. And it was really very important that how we can do a digital transformation, and those important points were really very, very enlightening. So thanks a lot for that, Mr. Robert. Next, I will request Mr. Aijaz Ahmad. He is the Chief Technology Officer, I&M Bank Limited. So Mr. Aijaz Ahmad, Chief Technology Officer, he is at the heart of the technology, and he is going to brief us that what financial services and what type of a digital transformation we should be looking for. So we are eager to hear from you, Mr. Aijaz Ahmad. Over to you.
So thank you, Javed, and the co-panelists and the organizers. So I think to start with, I had more expectations that this session is about more on the digital identification. As you can see, the World Economic Forum and globally, there's a lot of stress in this area. I think it's rightly understood that any country that doesn't take right steps right now in setting up proper infrastructure, proper environment on the digital identification front is likely to lag behind the rest of the world. So So when we talk of the digital ID, right, that is in essence a very important step or move forward for any nation in the present digital era. And you can see without a right infrastructure, without a right digital ID set up in a country, either from the government or from the private sector, okay, in absence of this, it impacts access to the basic financial service to a large chunk of the population. It obscures a reliable view of customer activity. It can impact access to the full range of financial services. And of course, the lack of unique ID increases the cost of providing financial services to certain segments of the society, thereby impacting financial inclusion. So in essence, if you see, our identity is literally who we are. And as the digital technology of the fourth industrial revolution advances, our identity increasingly becomes digital. This digital ID determines what products, services, information we can access, or conversely, what's closed off to us. If we fail to act now, we could face a future in which digital ID widens the divide between the digital haves and digital have-nots. A future where nearly all individuals lack choice, trust, and rights in the online world. If we act wisely today, digital ID can help transform the future for billions of individuals all over the world, enabling them to access new economic, political, and social opportunities while enjoying the digital safety, privacy, and other human rights. So if you see the scenario today, the latest reports suggest that 1 in 2 women in the low-income countries does not have an ID, okay? And roughly more than 1.2 billion population in the world out of 7.6 billion population do not have the basic official foundational ID, okay? These people are unable to prove their ID, and millions more have forms of ID that cannot be reliably verified or authenticated, resulting in exclusion from economic opportunities, such as those being created by the emerging digital economy, as well as social and political rights. So my expectation from the session was to understand, at least to give the viewers more visibility on ID front, digital ID front, where the world is moving, especially the East Africa. And I would love to hear more about our neighboring countries as well, maybe Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, where we are moving in that front, because it's impacting the immature infrastructure therein is impacting the financial services, both from the customer perspective as well the banks as the business perspective. Both of them, it's impacting seriously. So in an environment of rapid technological evolution, adoption and innovation and benefits of digital economy are exponential. Those who can use it to their advantage stand to reap transformative benefits. Those who cannot face the risk of being left behind. In the absence of focused and thoughtful efforts to include those excluded today, the gap between the digital haves and have-nots may grow even wider and perpetuate from generation to generation. Today, half of the world's population, over 4 billion people, have no reliable connection to the internet and its opportunities. And as I said earlier also, over 1.1 billion people remain invisible because they don't have a legally identified digital ID, which they can use to reap economic benefits, connect to the financial world, okay? So that's my take on this particular area. So I would allow to hear more on what is happening on the digital ID side.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Aijaz, on this digital ID and also presenting the both perspective, the customer perspective, and also the bank's perspective. And I believe that next I will ask Mr. Dr. Konstantinos. He's the Chief Innovation and Data Officer at Wema Bank. I believe that he has got some issues. He may not be able to come on a video, but he will be briefing us through audio only. So back to you, Doctor.
Great. Thank you very much for allowing me to develop my thoughts on digital banking and the potential of digital identity. So look, I can speak from the Nigerian, West African perspective, okay? Similar to what the previous speakers mentioned, digital identity is of high priority, especially in Nigeria. You know, it will have exponential benefits on multiple levels. But beyond the digital identity part, which is, you know, the main the topic we just discussed, I think in overall the importance of data analytics and overall interoperability between different platforms. I think that's the most crucial in a digital world. And let me be more specific now. Essentially, digital identities result in data, okay? However, what happens is that what we see in most African banks, there is a lot of data sitting in different places within organizations, and there is lack of the infrastructure and of the ability to leverage this data. Okay, so my thinking is that yes, technology is important, but also upskilling on crucial factors is very important, and particularly in data analytics and data strategies. I'll tell you a simple example. In the bank I work for, in Wema Bank, there was no data capability before that. When within 2 years, simply by creating the data infrastructure and by implementing basic data skills, we're able to simply do cross-selling, nothing complicated. You know, we're able to analyze the customer profiles and do cross-selling for new products and existing customers. We increased our revenues on the retail department by 25% only by leveraging existing data, okay? So I think that from my point of view, beyond digital identity, data skills, data analytics, data infrastructure, and all things data are crucial for the development, you know, and for a successful digital transformation. And then also the other element is open banking and interoperability. So what I mean on that is that banks have to benefit a lot by partnering with digital identity startups, fintech startups, and different types of fintech startups. Why that is because the startups, they are creative, they have ideas, they don't have the limitations that organizations have. However, organizations, they have the ability to test and trial, and they have also the money to invest for trials. So I think that's another very critical element, the openness, open banking, and interoperability between different platform providers. So in overall, to conclude, beyond digital identity, which is a crucial technology, and I totally think we should focus on that as well, I think that data analytics and the overall data capability is crucial to leverage digital identities and, you know, be first achievers in digital transformations. And also the second thing I told, which is open banking and partnerships with fintechs and telcos and different other platforms. Thank you very much, Javed, for allowing me to develop my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Please remain with us. And thank you for sharing this data analytics and digital identity and the relationship between them. Now I will request Mr. Brighton. He's the Group Manager, IT Audit and Digital Project Assurance from Letshego Holding Limited. And Mr. Brighton is very famous about his insight about the technology. He's expert in this area. He's young and he has got many things to share with us. So, Mr. Brighton, we are eager to hear from you. Over to you, Mr. Brighton.
Thank you very much, Javed. And thank you, everyone. I would want to probably take a step back and look at it from a very strategic perspective and look at some of the things that I think are shaping the future of financial services, but also influencing the choice of technology and how we get to apply technology going forward. Obviously, the first aspect is the customer-driven aspect, where we think today's customer is more aware, is very cost sensitive, is very digitally savvy, and using this power, they are getting to dictate the services that they want, the value they want, and even how they want them, they want it offered. you would notice over time today, customers are not too keen on loyalty to a particular brand, but more they are looking at where they're getting maximum value that touches most of areas of the financial lifestyle, but also anchored around trust systems. And this is where we are talking about data protection, talking about credibility, talking about privacy, and more also on a very enhanced customer experience. And this is where we're seeing demanding services on the go, looking at convenience and this experience and value being offered through digital and technology platforms. One of the interesting aspects around this that we've seen is where traditionally financial services firms used to, do risk profiling, where they look at the customer's history and, offer financial services based on that. But today we are seeing a shift towards more experiential and behavioral psychology that, looks at the financial habits behind customers' consumptions and see how they can influence these financial habits so that customers can consume more financial services. And this is why we're seeing so much work around data and the psychology aspect of it. And an interesting case is why you're asking, how can you change your financial habits so that you can save more? Or how can we change the way you save so that you can invest more? So that's a very interesting aspect that we are seeing around it. The second one is where today we are seeing convergence of players in the financial services industry. On one side, we have in telcos, even locally. So we have M-Pesa with Safaricom. We have big tech and platforms. You have WeChat and Alipay controlling about 98% of mobile payments in China. We have Facebook with Libra and WhatsApp. So there's a whole lot around that. And we also have your normal fintechs in different parts of the value chain, whether it's on complementary services or competing services. And what we are seeing around this is that the transactional revenue is continuously going to reduce and reduce and reduce and probably will get to zero. And therefore, the players within financial services industry are not going to compete on products or even digital channels that they are saying, but more in terms of the value and utility they are providing customer anchored around trust. Then the other aspect I look at is from a regulatory perspective, and someone mentioned, I think Aijaz mentioned aspect to do with identity. But one of the things we're seeing, and I saw from one of you in ARMS, that over 500 million Africans are not identified. And we are not just talking about digital identity. You're talking about even your typical normal identity being documented. And so this is one of the inhibitors for both financial inclusion and also digital inclusion. And I'm happy to see that most of the countries and governments are taking steps to register their citizens so that then they can be identified, documented, and then they can become inclusive, both from financial and digital perspective. And we saw this like in Kenya with the Huduma number. We've seen a lot of work in Rwanda with Irembo. So there's a whole lot of that. And I think also other aspects from a regulatory and government perspective is the underlying infrastructure.
And this is, yeah, thank you very much. It was really very informative, especially the way you have presented the business perspective, the saving, and how everything can be integrated. That was really good. Now, since we are running short of time, what we will do, we will be having a rapid fire session, right? So I have to include 2 or 3 questions together. So this will be just one-liner. So you have got maybe 30 seconds to answer this. And the question is that for African banks, what are the top 3 technology? So just please list 3 technology. I will be starting with Mr. Gary Thompson. So Mr. Gary Thompson, please, what will be your 3 points that what are the top 3 technology, what the African banks they will be looking for, just in 30 seconds.
Okay, quick 30 seconds on that. First of all, I think mobile banking in Africa has got to be the way forward. Like the mobile revolution took over before landlines on telephones. Why? Because if you're going to get financial inclusion, there is no branch network out in the bush. So if you're going to get people included, you need mobile. Secondly, you need skills. You need data skills. you need data scientists, and getting those skills in-house are going to help you be able to work on the data. Finally, STP. Bring your cost base completely down using straight-through processing as much as possible. Customer, end-to-end, alter your organizational structure to suit that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So, Mr. Ameur, this rapid fire session, what will be your top 3 technology, what the African bank they should be looking for? Mr. Ameur, top 3.
Thank you. So from my side, I think that the banks should be looking at big data analytics and data scientists, mobiles, and artificial intelligence. So those are the main 3 things.
Mr. Francis, what are your top 3? Top 3 technology for African banks.
Perfect. I would start with an omni-channel customer engagement platform, and then the analytics and reporting part, and then general digital transformation within the bank. These 3 technologies are very key for a bank in Africa.
Excellent. Mr. Robert, what are your top 3?
My top 3, the first one will be open banking, the second one datafication, the third one AI. In datafication, what we can do even with the lack of formal digital identities, that we can have what is known as the golden record, which can be informed by open banking. Since the customer interacts with different entities like telcos and fintech, and there are legs of transactions there.
Excellent.
We can get a single source of truth.
Good. Doctor, can you tell us what are your top 3, please?
For me, I think artificial intelligence and its different applications, number 1. Number 2, big data, which has already been mentioned, data innovation and so on. And number 3, blockchain and its different applications in cybersecurity, in the middle office operations and so on. So these are my 3 technologies.
And now, Mr. Aijaz Ahmad, what is your top 3, please?
Javed, I will like to speak my heart out. I think it's my passion to see that. Yeah. So it might seem a bit of daydream. So I would like to have one Africa, one payment app across 54 countries, right? That is my one dream. I don't know whether it's possible or not. That's on one area. Then again, on the banking side, I would like banks to invest in the skills development in the digital side, create a ecosystem where we can benefit from the surroundings growing with us, right? So on the third front is, of course, the AI and the machine learning, the robotics. Those are the top technologies we should pursue.
Excellent. Lastly, Mr. Brighton, your top 3?
I think most of the data-driven technologies, AI, ML aspect around that, whether it's on the customer experience layer or the backend layer, but I think that there are going to be more interesting use cases towards microservices, open banking, and things that work at both the integration and backend layer.
Okay, excellent. So thanks a lot. So I want to thank all of the panelists for their wonderful information, the session, and the way you have enlightened us. Thanks a lot. And I believe that this is a great contribution to African banks. Really appreciate, and thank you very much.